From traders to travelers, Viking women lived rich and adventurous lives. They enjoyed more freedom and held more power in their society than many other women of their time. Like many traditional civilizations, Viking society at home and abroad was mainly dominated by men. Men hunted, fought, traded and farmed, while women's lives focused on cooking, caring for the home and raising children. Most Viking burials found by archaeologists reflect these traditional gender roles. Men were usually buried with weapons and tools, and women with household items, crafts and jewelry. But women in Viking Age Scandinavia did enjoy an unusual degree of freedom for their day. Today we'll explore what position the Viking woman had in her society and how she was treated. As wife, host, teacher and storyteller, the mistress of the household was the fulcrum of Viking family life. There is no doubt about it. Viking women lived in a man's world. Viking men fought the wars, did most of the trading and were even, strictly speaking, the only true Vikings. The Old Norse word vikingar referred solely to men. For this point in history, however, Viking women enjoyed a high degree of social freedom. They could own property, request a divorce if not treated properly, and reclaim their dowries if their marriages ended. And they shared responsibility for running farms and homesteads with their menfolk. They were also protected by law from a range of unwanted male attention. When the Spanish-Arabic traveler Al-Tartushi visited Hedeby in the 1900s, he was surprised to hear that women had the right to divorce if they wished to. If a woman wanted a divorce, the process itself was simple. She had to call witnesses to her home and marriage bed and declare in front of them that she had divorced her husband. The marriage contract usually stated how family property would be divided up in case of a divorce. When it came to the conditions for divorce, however, there were a large number of divorce rules, which are evidence of a quite advanced legal system. For example, a woman could demand a divorce if her husband settled in a new country while on his travels, but only if the man neglected to go to bed with her for 3 years. The aim of this was to secure the wife against a life of loneliness. The most typical grounds for divorce were, however, sudden poverty in the man's family or violence on the part of the husband. If a man struck his wife 3 times, she could demand a divorce. Cheating on the part of the man wasn't considered a reason for divorce. In fact, men were able to bring various mistresses into the home. However, the official housewife kept authority over the new women in the household. Female infidelity, on the other hand, was punished hard. We don't know how frequent divorces were in the Viking period, but the rights to divorce and inheritance indicate that women had an independent judicial status. After divorce, babies and small children generally went with their mothers, whilst older children were divided up amongst their parents' families depending upon their wealth and status. Women tended to marry between the ages of 12 and 15, and families negotiated to arrange those marriages. When an attempt was made to woo a woman, the father didn't need to ask his daughter's opinion about the interested male. In cases in which the girl opposed the family's wishes, historical documents describe how this often ended badly. The woman's reputation and place in society was connected to that of her husband. Historical evidence often describe how various women compete over who has the best husband. Though the man was the ruler of the house, the woman played an active role in managing her husband as well as the household. By contemporary standards, Viking home life was noisy, dirty and smelly, but cozy and communal too. Most Vikings lived in a long, single-roomed structure where sitting and sleeping accommodations were arranged around a central hearth. Such long houses were the hubs of Viking domestic life, where people cooked, ate, socialized and slept. Norse women had full authority in the domestic sphere, especially when their husbands were absent. If the man of the household died, his wife would adopt his role on a permanent basis, single-handedly running the family farm or trading business. The woman was also responsible for entertaining honored guests, although it was primarily men who conducted practical, legal and political negotiations when the home was used for business. Another important role played by women was handing on knowledge to the next generation in the home, in part by sharing poems and stories, including the famous myths and sagas that were later written down in the medieval Iceland. The mistress of the household also had responsibility for its valuables. As the Viking home was also the center of a family business, this included any raw materials produced, products that could be sold if there was a surplus. The discovery of weighting scales in certain female graves suggests that women, especially those living in urban areas, sometimes took charge of the family's finances and may have negotiated terms of sale or trade. The Viking home was powered by women's skilled work. The top of a Viking woman's to-do list of domestic duties was feeding her family and guests. And in a time before mass production, the preparation of food and drink was tough work. To bake flatbread, women first had to make flour by grinding barley and wheat. Meat and fish had to be preserved, while labor-intensive dairy products such as cheese, skyr, a yogurt-like cheese, and butter also featured in their diet. Women also made clothes for the household. Wool, once shorn from the sheep, had to be spun using a hand spindle and then woven on an upright loom. Linen was made from beating flax that was then also spun into a thread for weaving. Smaller textile items such as socks were produced through single needle knitting. For more delicate work such as decorative borders on garments, table weaving was an important skill. Women also created tapestries to decorate the homes of wealthier households and important buildings. More prosaically, women made the sails for Viking ships by stitching together woven strips of wool. The female head of the family often doubled up as its spiritual guide. With many gods and goddesses in the pantheon and a host of other supernatural beings stalking the earth, the matter of who you believed in and how and where you contacted them varied across the Viking world. Cult practices could take place outdoors or in religious buildings, but it seems that it was common to worship one's favorite deity in the home. Evidence suggests such rites were the province of the female head of the household. In the early 11th century, the Icelandic poet Sigvard came across women on a remote Swedish farm performing a sacrifice to the elves, although as a Christian he was not allowed to witness the ceremony. In the Viking society there were female cult practitioners whose social status required that they perform religious rites. There are parallels with the better documented masculine role, someone who seems to have had both secular and supernatural power in the Viking Age. We also have evidence of more specialized traveling cult practitioners, both male and female, although what they actually did is still obscure. There were a number of Norse goddesses such as Freya, the goddess of love, sex and beauty, and Hel, the partly decomposed ruler of the Netherworld, which we know about mainly through later Icelandic sources, although we can be sure about the Viking Age origins of at least some of these figures. From the evidence we can also deduce that Scandinavian women were drawn to Christianity, with devotion to the Virgin Mary confirmed in the 11th century Viking runic inscription from Sweden and Norway, an enormous runestone from Dina, Norway, on which a mother commemorates her dead daughter, depicts a nativity scene. Whether they fought in battle or not, conflict was a part of life for many Viking women. War in the Viking Age was fought at close quarters with swords, spears and axes. Women could not escape such violence, especially if they were part of a group or community under attack, or traveling with a group of merchants who had to defend their wares. However, conclusive evidence for female participation in war as trained and regular warriors is currently slight. Despite the recent interpretation of a 10th century warrior burial at Birka in Sweden as being the burial of a woman, the significance of this burial is still under debate. While in other instances women found buried with weapons had actually been laid to rest with everyday tools such as axes for chopping firewood. Recent research on the Great Heathen Army, a Scandinavian force that harried the kingdoms of England in the 860s and 870s, suggests this was less an army and more a large, mixed and mobile group of people. They engaged in crafts and trading as well as raiding, and certainly included women and children in their number, as evidenced by textile-making tools found at Torskey, Lincolnshire, and a children's burial at Repton, Derbyshire. When this group was encamped, no doubt everyone had to join in the defense if they were attacked, but as Viking armies in England became more organized, there were other options. In the 890s, as noted by the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, Heathen's army put their women and children in a place of safety in East Anglia before embarking on raids. The female role in war is also explored in Old Norse mythology, where Valkyries, armed female spirits, assist Odin, the god of war. Their job is to select the warriors allowed into Valhalla, who will help Odin await Ragnarok, an apocalyptic series of events, including a deadly battle between the gods and their enemies. Female travelers journeyed to destinations as far-flung as Jerusalem, Rome, Russia and North America. The Viking Age was a time of exploration. Between the 8th and 11th centuries, those with roots in Scandinavia traveled to the Caspian Sea and the Mediterranean and crossed the Atlantic to reach North America. Women participated in most of these voyages, and trading and settlement were their main purpose. There is evidence for this in the Scandinavian-style female jewelry found extensively in the present-day Russia, Ukraine, and further afield, showing that the Viking traders and rulers known as the Rus took their wives and families with them. The female jewelry discovered by metal detectorists in eastern England in the last few decades offers further evidence of female settlement in Danelaw, the Viking-dominated parts of North and East England. As for Iceland, an uninhabited island at the beginning of the Viking Age, it would not exist as a nation today if its settlers had not included women, with some born in the British Isles rather than in Scandinavia. While most of the first settlers of Iceland recorded in the medieval Book of Settlements are men, 13 women are named as having made the journey in an open ship to claim land in Iceland. Further afield, both an excavation of a spindle whorl and a bone needle and the Icelandic sagas suggest that women participated in the voyages to North America. And with the coming of Christianity, women were soon going on pilgrimages to Rome or Jerusalem, as in the case of the 11th century Swedish woman Ingirun, who set up a runestone in memory of herself. The inscription states that she intended to travel to Jerusalem, and she appears to have been uncertain as to whether she would come back. So which one of these facts surprised you the most? What do you know about the life of Viking women? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And if you enjoy historical facts that are not learned at school, subscribe to our channel. If you want to learn more about women in history, check out our video about women at Versailles. Thank you for watching.